So we have some pretty big geopolitics to talk about today. Over the weekend, some Saudi oil facilities were attacked, and the Trump administration is increasingly looking at Iran as the culprit. And before we get into sort of like the specific analysis, anytime in the Trump era that we're doing an analysis of geopolitics, there's sort of like the normal analysis one would do based on the last 200 years of American history. And then you have to modify that analysis to account for the fact that Donald Trump is president of the United States. An analogy that came to me over the weekend is sort of like if you have an airline pilot that flies a particular airplane, right, an Airbus 330, and you say, what is the takeoff speed of the Airbus 330? And you have your like in a vacuum answer, which might be 150 knots. But then much like you have to account for Donald Trump being president in geopolitics, you then have to account for whether the runway is dry or wet and what is the elevation of the airport and other things. And you might end up with an answer where, well, in this particular case, the takeoff speed for an Airbus 330 is 160 knots when accounting for these other factors. And similarly, with Donald Trump thrown into geopolitics, we have to account for Donald Trump in making our evaluation. So a few different things to go over. It's the event that took place, the hypocrisy from Donald Trump, and also the growing subservience by Donald Trump to the Saudis, which is something that we should all be extremely worried about, in particular because of the connections we already know Trump and Jared Kushner and others around him have to the Saudis. So first of all, why the focus on Iran? So far, what we know is that a number of Saudi oil facilities were attacked over the weekend. We have satellite images that show 17 points of impact coming from the north or the northwest, which could be Iran, it could be Iraq. Now, in the immediate, the Iranian-backed Houthi militias, I'm never sure how to pronounce that, from Yemen claimed responsibility. And there are reasons to be skeptical about this. The direction of the attacks is at least a potential reason to be skeptical. The use of cruise missiles and drones seem to exceed the known capabilities of the Houthis. And Donald Trump, as usual, is reacting to everything in the worst possible way. Erratic, indirect, and sort of showing his cards that he is indeed subservient to the Saudis. Hypocritical subservience is maybe how I would sum it up. So first of all, Donald Trump tweeting, Saudi Arabia oil supply was attacked. There is reason to believe that we know the culprit, are locked and loaded depending on verification, but are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe was the cause of this attack and under what terms we would proceed. Look at all of the extremely disturbing elements just to this one tweet, hinting at Iran but not saying it. We have reason to believe we know who did it. Why not just come out and say it? Locked and loaded. It's a threat of violence, but again, it's predicated on Donald Trump having reason to believe that he knows who it is, but saying that once the Saudis tell him who they believe did it, he's locked and loaded and ready to go under whatever terms the Saudis say are the ones that Donald Trump should operate under. This is a level of subservience to the Saudis. And then we get to the hypocrisy, because Donald Trump in 2014 tweeted, quote, Saudi Arabia should fight their own wars, which they won't, or pay us an absolute fortune to protect them and their great wealth, $1 trillion. Of course, Donald Trump was not president at the time. Barack Obama was president at the time. So was that just BS and political bluster? Probably. The other possibility is Donald Trump actually has made some kind of deal with the Saudis for the U.S. to be their protector. And in a way, that deal has sort of been made in plain sight for decades through American foreign policy. Donald Trump may well see, and it actually wouldn't be that crazy, he may see the endless and infinitely growing arms deals with Saudi Arabia as that sort of payment to the United States for the protection of the Saudis. You may recall that when Barack Obama sort of semi-bowed to the Saudis when they were greeting each other, the right went crazy, even though George W. Bush was kissing the Saudis on the cheek and they seemed fine with it at the time. Now Donald Trump is saying, when the Saudis tell me who they think did it, and when the Saudis tell me what the appropriate response would be, we're going to go out and do it. Really strong leader, right? Projecting strength and independence and focusing on what's best for the Oh, wait, no, he's really not. Some of the bigger geopolitical questions here. Does Donald Trump want a war with someone to help the arms industry? Is that sort of what is at the core of what's going on here? Does Donald Trump want a war with someone so that he can finally be the tough guy that he, of course, is not, but desperately wants to be? Does Donald Trump want a war with someone because he believes it will help his reelection? After all, that would not be incorrect in a sense. I'm trying to think of when the United States voted out an incumbent president in the middle of a war or significant military engagement. And I'm having trouble thinking of that. Maybe there are examples. Or, because this is all obviously not just one thing, it could be a combination. Does Donald Trump want a war because it will be a distraction from one of his many current or upcoming scandals? A combination is usually sort of the right answer with this president. I got a lot of emails from the audience over the last year saying, David, at some point Trump is going to war. The question is, who will it be against and under what pretenses? But the guy is going to find a war one way or another. Either John Bolton is going to help him, or if John Bolton is the impediment, Bolton will go, which he since has, and Trump will find a war on his own. Maybe not more cynical than reality actually suggests here. And of course, immediately the economic impact is significant, relatively minor in the context of the broader insanity, but oil prices spiking about 1/6 from $60 to $71. We don't even get that much of our oil from Saudi Arabia. The notion that we are dependent on the Saudis for the oil itself is wrong. I mean, they have a big market share, but from my recollection, we get around 11% of our total oil consumption from foreign countries. And of that 11%, I think it's 9% only is from Saudi Arabia. So the actual numbers don't bear it out, but of course, a massive player in OPEC and in controlling the oil market. So an economic impact right away. I don't know where this will go. We'll keep following it. I want to hear from you about it. But this is, of course, going to be a very, very crazy year leading up to the November 2020 election.